video about building boundaries, and it kind of like is just going along with like a lot of the stuff I've been looking at recently online, in terms of just sort of like I've talked a lot recently about toxic relationships, breaking from toxic relationships, and autonomy, self-empowerment, finding your inner bad bitch and whatever. There's one video that includes that, which is actually one of my favourite ones, I'd say, like if you're watching it. Anyway, I think it's my one about doesn't matter, just I've got other videos. So apparently the boundaries that are categorised come into emotional, material, time, mental and physical, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about all of them, and like the disclaimer, which I love this phrase, because apparently boundaries are the idea of boundaries is to also break down, obviously ideally you want the occurrences that create the boundary breaks to be limited in some way. Obviously if you have like an abusive partner, they're gonna break boundaries consistently because they're of their own problems. Obviously I know like life's really complicated, I'm not like, you know, hating on people that are in abusive relationships. It's such a complicated situation, and obviously that's something in itself, disclaimer, but also like, yeah, like obviously that sort of circumstance, you're going to find a lot of boundaries being broken in toxic relationships and stuff, and even like if you find that you have self-defeating behaviours, you might even break your own boundaries because you might sort of anticipate this happening, or it's happened with someone else. I think that's also something to take in, because sometimes it's not your fault, but sometimes you just have this stored within your subconscious, and you kind of self-defeat and like repeat those cycles because you don't really realise you're doing it on a subconscious level. That's also fun to keep in mind. Fun. But yeah, it's for you and set by you. You can... Okay, as I was saying, camera ran out. Nothing changes. So yeah, set by you, for you, in... Oh, there's my earring back. Okay, cool. So I've been wearing the same hoops. Everyone ever do that where you wear like silver hoops and they just stay in your ears for like days and years and whatever? Well, not years, but that's why I love silver jewellery, because I just never take it off unless I change it. But it's fine to sleep in and stuff. Actually, this isn't actually silver, this one. But anyway, sentimental, so it's fine. So anyway, the boundaries are set for you, by you, and like it comes with this sense of autonomy, which I like really stand by, because think about narcissists and narcissistic abuse, they can't comprehend autonomy within another person. They literally just sort of like go like through like life not considering another person's autonomy. Like obviously their life revolves around themselves, their ego, protecting their ego, their rage, their emotional like instability, and their sort of like perpetual childlike behaviour. From a narcissistic sense, I know that lots of people, like obviously people are different, aren't just like narcissistic, people have like positive traits, but if someone has high narcissistic traits, that will be like their main place that they come from. So like the point is they don't understand autonomy. And the great thing about boundaries for yourself, especially as you come more and more into an autonomous self, if you've come from sort of a situation that can come from that. Sorry, I had to delete a video. So obviously also what comes with narcissism, I'm just going to put this down out because it all kind of works together. I feel like it's people that are negative and feel inferior to you for reasons that aren't your fault. Obviously I've mentioned a lot about narcissists. If anyone feels inferior regardless of narcissistic traits, and they attack you from an instinctual level, which is, it's kind of subconscious for them and unchangeable a lot of the time. If someone tries to bring you down by nature, if they have the type of personality where apparently if we feel inadequate as people, we will either leer towards, we'll overcompensate, right, or we'll try and compensate for feeling inadequate. You can either go down the people-pleasing route, I've mentioned this before, but it is relevant. People-pleasing, overachieving, I feel like that's me. Also comes with its own issues, and also there's a couple of other ones, having this like obsession with like social hierarchy, and like trying to like sort of like compensate by status or money and stuff. Maybe that's like where those people that are obsessed with money sit in that spectrum. But you can also become very bullying. That's one route that people go down, and it's just like one of the types of routes you can go down. For this reason, I believe it's unchangeable. When people are bullyish by nature, it's not something that changes. It's their primary defense mechanism that they've kind of grown up with, and it's unlikely they'll change. Obviously, everyone can temper their behaviour, you know, if they really wanted to. Anyone can change any behaviour if they really chose to, but I would say like it's unlikely to change if someone's like bullyish. And if they are that way and they're trying to like bring you down or knock you down if you're not just like their level, that should never happen for a start. Like, you know, these people are usually very like weak natured, weak moraled. They'll usually crumble under any sort of like backlash, but sometimes they do also want you to like respond. But if they can't get dominance or control over you, usually they'll give up and move on. So that's something that's quite nice to like realize. But then obviously I understand like bullying is like a massive thing, especially in school. I was bullied myself, and you know, I came from an environment that wasn't really very healthy, and I think it kind of just came naturally to me and normal to me to kind of like be degraded, narcissistic sort of stuff. So I don't really blame myself for that sort of thing. That's something I'm sort of still working on. But anyway, yeah, so but the fact is about boundaries is it's very much comes from yourself, because often your brain, even though it might be it might be calibrated in the wrong way, I've mentioned before, because of abuse and sort of survival techniques to allow behaviours to kind of allow you to keep rolling through life. It's always like the thing I've learned recently is that obviously I know from an intrinsic level, and being in therapy and stuff, I realised that you shouldn't blame yourself and it's never your fault for abuse, obviously on a logical level. But because the lines can get blurred between what's your fault, what's not, the thing about abusers is they like to blame everything on you. It's kind of like an instinct for them to just sort of project their problems on you, and them being sort of antagonistic or whatever on you. I'm not saying I don't have narcissistic traits, I do. I'm also empathic. I would consider myself a dark empath. At the same time, I don't go out my way to antagonize people. So people that are like sociopathic or whatever, they can't sit with the fact that they're sociopathic, so they'll just kind of like chuck that on someone else. Can be funny in some ways if other people kind of also recognize it, and you're just sort of like, oh my god, they're actually delusional. So that's kind of funny, but at the same time, like, it can be also very damaging, and they can act in really like violent ways. They can, you know, it can be just like a really bad situation, and it's best to just distance yourself as much as you can. And there are ways and means of dealing with those people through work or whatever, talking to a manager. If you're at school, talking to a teacher. I'm in a shared house. I've managed to get one evicted because it's just like not something I need to deal with. Moving swiftly on, that's okay. So there's ways and means of dealing with people. Obviously, if they're toxic family members or friendships, you probably have some form of choice, and I know there's a lot of cultural and sort of like conditioning that comes with that, and that's kind of what I'm talking about in terms of conditioning. It's always a level of conditioning and a level of beliefs that your brain has accumulated through survival, especially as a child. If you have like a sociopathic or narcissistic parent and you're not getting attention from them, your instinct is to do whatever you can to stay alive and stay healthy as you can. Your brain as a child knows, you know, it calls out. Children are like smart. They will reach out when they need attention. If they're not gaining that attention, they'll do what they can to gain that attention. Any child is the same. You know, obviously some people go down the antisocial route, but that's something else. You know, I don't think you should sort of like, you know, for that reason, like feel empathy for them. I feel like if you have like a screaming child that is literally just not shutting up for like no reason, because I feel like they're bound to be okay, I don't think you can call a child antisocial. I don't like to, you can't judge a child. Children are children. But at the same time, as those children grow up to be adults, they are perpetually that way, and they do not recover and become empathic and nice people. They sort of stay as they are. So anyway, but you can't judge children. That's horrible. But at the same time, moving on, so when you're a baby, you will sort of accumulate one sec. Okay, as I was saying, you accumulate. I'll get to the point now, because I've literally not even got into the actual logistics of the video yet. But yeah, as a child, I think it is important to mention that as a child, you develop these sort of like mechanisms and beliefs about yourself and about other people in order to survive, and those often can be dispelled throughout life. But when you have this core need, for example, to people please, or sort of you know, be like serving to another person and meet another person's needs because you had to do that in childhood, or you sort of like are easily shamed or triggered, or like attack, like if anyone's that's abused and they feel like, you know, shamed or attacked or like brought down a notch, that's not your fault or problem. That's the person that does its problem, the abuser's problem. But at the same time, if you have a background of that and it sits like, you know, if you're maybe not fully, if you're not as resilient, I don't think you should blame yourself for not being resilient enough, to be honest. Obviously everyone wants to build on their resilience, but I think it should come from a place of within, inner love and wanting, rather than to ward other people off. Because you could be the strongest, most like fit, athletic, mentally resilient, healed person in the world, and you would still be attacked by someone. Do you know what I mean? So it's not about not being strong enough or not being resilient enough. I think a level of resilience is important. And obviously abuse can break down resilience over time. Anyway, but I think it's never your fault when these traumas come up and force you into beliefs and mindsets, and have stored physical body trauma, because the body doesn't lie. The mind can often distract itself and make mechanisms to keep you focused on your daily life so you can live. And I know that doesn't always work, and I've had mental health problems, and I know when that doesn't work. But the body does not lie in terms of what your trauma has been, which is why I'm a massive advocate. Somatic healing. Okay, maybe we'll section this video out, who knows. Getting into this actual video, so I think that's given me a lot of forgiveness and peace and like compassion. Not necessarily, I think compassion is the most important thing, but it's also, yeah, that is just important to take into consideration from what I've found. Emotional is the first. Boundaries. We all have the right to feel, okay? Often some people, when they have poor emotional regulation, they don't like it when people feel happy. Like, this is something I even watched a video on this morning about how to not be bitter towards people that you have to kind of deal with in the moment. And obviously you don't want to sort of like put your life on hold because there are negative people in your life, or people that like sort of are causing you issues. Even though obviously those things are happening and it's important to register those things and obviously make the appropriate action, sometimes if you're like consistently bitter, it's important to actually be honest with yourself when you get to the point. I think all of this comes in time, but a good tactic for this is to recognize what they're actually like. Don't kid yourself necessarily into what they're actually like. I know this isn't quite as quick as this, depends how long you've been being abused or you've been deceived about who they are for, and you have all, you know, these problems, and obviously, you know, you can't handle the world, you can't handle all your problems in one day, but sometimes dealing with who, like seeing who they are for the start, not trying to force them to be anything that they're not, and then you can kind of make this boundary within yourself at that point. And sometimes you're not strong enough or ready enough to actually enforce that boundary with someone that's actually been extremely abusive to you, and you're still very wounded and open to it. But you can then let in the positive, and that brings a sense of ease. The opposite of bitterness is ease, I think. I've done a lot of parallel emotional things. I'm very much a level of like, I'm very much advocate of like finding the opposite emotion to like understand and figure out a situation and sort of like heal from a situation. Like if you feel a massive amount of like anger to I don't know, that's probably for another video. I've done a video already on emotions and I kind of touch on that stuff there, but it's quite an old one. But yeah, so when you are, yeah, sorry, what's it? We all have the right to feel, basically. And some people will just like either try and invalidate what you're saying. There's a whole host of things that like especially narcissists will do, or people that are on the narcissistic spectrum. They will invalidate your feelings. They will do things to distract you from your own feelings and make it about them. They will you know, do things that make you feel worse about yourself because that makes them then feel better. It's all about dominance a lot of the time with like people with a lot of high sociopathic traits and stuff. It's often about sort of like the need to feel better than someone else because of their like inevitable, you know, poor perception of themselves, which they can't actually understand. They will make others feel worse, especially if they have like a bullying sort of like coping mechanism. It's really where like that comes from. So we all have a right to feel, and I think this is even something I work on to this day, we all have a right to feel our emotions freely. I think, bearing in mind it comes from a lizard brain's perspective, I understand people can be still in abusive situations with parents, partners, whatever, and you might feel it's actually a level of safety that you use to hide your emotions, but at the same time, when you're brought up with trauma, you often are a bit of, I was a bit of a truth teller, which probably made me verbally okay to make videos like this. But at the same time, if you have that truth teller aspect to yourself, you can often be very, very open about your feelings, and especially when you are learning more and more about narcissists and sociopaths and stuff, it's not always the case that you have to tell them. You can tell them. I'm much of an advocate of, like, if someone's an asshole to you, you can be an asshole back. Like, I'm not going to go out my way to be nice to someone that's a cunt bag. Like, just saying. And it's a case of, you know, I don't think that that's my personal like take on it, but I also believe that indifference is the goal towards toxic people. Like, when you have like an emotional charge towards someone, you're giving your God-given like mental space to them, and sometimes there are things you have to learn from people, and I don't think not everyone that's toxic that comes into your life you have to learn something from, because you probably already know what they're like and you've come across people like that in the past. So I don't think that's always the case, but sometimes, like, when you release bitterness, it's actually a level of discernment, and more, maybe you might be a bit more closed, but that's kind of okay, because if you're too open, you're letting these people in anyway, so you kind of built discernment from that situation, and you kind of crystallize that sort of mentality of that kind of person. But at the same time, you know, I've always said, when you cut toxic people out, it doesn't change your prospects, it doesn't change who you are as a person, like your spirit. I understand people can damage your spirit to an extent. It always comes back stronger and more resilient. You know, I know that's kind of an, you know, I know lots of people need lots of support, and that's obviously natural through abuse. Like, please get the support needed. Please have a good friendship circle, network, healthy people, healthy self. I know there's so many like support systems out there, and the internet's amazing for stuff like that as well. Thank God for the internet, so that's where I've learned loads of this information. But yeah, if you actually are yeah, you can often feel as well that you can be on call for people that are not, that you shouldn't be on call for. Like, you shouldn't be on call for anyone emotionally. Like, I understand, like, if you have a close friend and they're going through a hard time and you say you can ring me whenever, like, that's fine, as long as they're not taking the piss and you're comfortable with the reciprocal, like, equally yoked friendship, and that's something different. But I was an advocate earlier of not giving that sort of right to someone that doesn't deserve it, for a start. Like, I think you kind of do this naturally, but sometimes there's nothing wrong with the way we love, okay, as a person, in terms of, as long as you're not abusive. Like, who am I to say that loving is right or wrong? Like, I'm not God, I don't know how he works, his ways are not our ways. But in my personal, obviously logical opinion, if you don't have high narcissistic traits, like, obviously narcissism is like a personality problem, you know, so the fact is, if there's nothing wrong with the way you love, okay, as a person, given you've been abused, or someone's told you, like, not reciprocated that love, because they can't, because they have no ability to feel empathy for someone, or very, very low ability to feel empathy. They don't have the willingness to feel empathy that is going to be healthy for you. They just don't have the, like, mental capacity to reciprocate what you need as a person in order to have an equally yoked relationship, be that in friendship or whatever. And it's a case of, you can then question yourself, because these people will very much make you feel this way, that it's your fault, again, to justify their inadequacy. And it's not your fault. The way you love is the way you love. You reach out for that love. God loves us. God will reciprocate our love, for a start. Anyone that's, I'm not trying to indoctrinate here, and I definitely think religion is very, 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 for the person, some people don't even relate to it, but I think source energy, you can connect to yourself, you can connect to nature, you can connect to source energy and God from that, and Jesus from that level that you truly are. And the more you do that, the more you get to know yourself, the more that you know what's not right for you, what is right for you, healing from past issues that kind of give you these wrong beliefs. So yeah, it's not realistic to be emotionally on call for someone all the time. And just even this feeling of like, I need to be sort of like looking after this person's needs before my own, before I can relax, kind of thing. So yeah, when you feel like you can't obviously express yourself emotionally, sometimes it's okay to just do it to yourself though. Like even on a video I was watching a lot about CPTSD and like recovery from like toxic people, toxic childhoods and whatever. It's actually advocated to write it rather than say it. Like it's so important to have people to talk to. If you can go to therapy, amazing. If you can be open. I've been so open about like well, not open to everyone. I was actually very closed to a lot of people while I was experiencing like mental health problems and stuff. But it's a case of writing and journaling is so helpful, because obviously you won't get always a resolution from these kind of toxic people. Like they don't plan or like want to change because they feel like that works for them, and it's like obviously a selfish mindset from their perspective, but you know, it's not going to make much of a difference. Like obviously you can get yourself away from them if you can get them like fired or kicked. Don't try and get them anyway, but it's just a case of like, that's why journaling and like the like they say, it's from the outside inside out, not the outside in, and it's so true. Like once you build this resilience, break down bad patterns and neural pathways, stop accepting things that are not healthy for you, you just don't attract that stuff anymore. And if you do, you just know how to handle it, and you just kind of have sort of like transcended that situation, and then your universe will bring you the next thing to worry about. You know, and that's kind of how we sort of blossom as people, because you know, you can't help everything you've sort of like experienced as a person. I'm just gonna move on to the next one now, because I think I've spoken about emotions a lot. And yeah, just the last thing on emotions actually is I think emotional intelligence is so important, especially for people that have kind of like had to sit in this sort of like bitterness or like neglect at any point in life. To I've actually gone on emotional thesauruses in the past, like typed in the word bitterness, and underneath it will come, you know, whatever the words that are like bitter. This is what I mean. That's why I need a thesaurus. It's so helpful to actually identify emotions sometimes, because sometimes you don't actually know exactly what you're feeling, or you can know it but you don't know the word for it, and it's a bit weird. It's not like I'm like verbally inept or anything. Like obviously you can hear me talk, I know how to talk, but sometimes just identifying the emotion, it can register it for the future and create that neural pathway in your mind for, if you feel that way, you can understand it and sympathize easier with yourself, because sometimes you just don't know, especially if you're kind of used to it, or you've still got the programming to sort of like accept that sort of emotion and just sort of like let it sit there without sort of addressing it. So anyway, the next one is material boundaries. So yeah, I think this can come from a place of material boundaries. If someone like takes your stuff, obviously theft is one thing. Like for example in a shared house, whatever, I've had that experience. Kind of what it is. But if you also are, I find if you've had like people in your life, partners, or you know, an upbringing where your stuff is violated in terms of like, you know, your personal space, I think this also probably comes more under physical boundaries, but at the same time your material space, like your stuff maybe is like even like taken away as a child, even if this is through like discipline. I think if it's done well, it shouldn't really affect necessarily, but it could do your material boundaries, in thinking like someone's going to take your stuff away from you even as an adult. Like that wasn't really done to me very much, I have to say. Maybe a bit actually, as like a punishment as a child. And obviously we live in a world where positive reinforcement I think is just more prevalent than negative reinforcement, I feel like, in this day and age. But so obviously it's still used as you know, but you can have this like mentality of like, my stuff will be taken away, and this sort of like mentality of like, I shouldn't have material items because they'll just be, you know, like I think it's fine not to be materialistic, you know, but at the same time, you know, you might have fear of possessions because you fear the pain that comes from having them taken away, or sort of like broken or violated depending on your situation, or stolen or whatever. Like it can just be a level of material boundaries, and it's even like things like though that are kind of like less, maybe not less severe, but it's even like a consentive material boundary that you can put up. Like for example, someone was talking about, if you have a friend and she kind of like borrows your stuff and like brings it back dirty, like you can set that boundary and be like, can you like wash it before you give it back, kind of thing. Just like, you know, obviously if it's a friend, I'm sure she wouldn't mind hearing that. And it's like that boundary's then been made by you, and given she's a friend, she'll comply with that, hopefully, and then you don't have to worry about it. And it's just healthy. Like, friends like boundaries, healthy people like boundaries. No one likes to be in a place where like everything's unbounded, or some people like unbounded things because it helps them manipulate. But in healthy relationships, like how, like I heard this thing as well, how would you feel if you ever been around a person where they have no, and like I've been a person that does this, and I think I have really understanding people in my life, but at the same time, you know when there's that person, you just know that they will be disheartened like whatever outcome happens, because they haven't got that grounding and stability in themselves to self-advocate and self like validate enough. So you're kind of, it puts them on this massive pedestal, and it kind of makes them feel uncomfortable and repelled, because they don't want to like cause you that harm. But obviously you're kind of putting them in this place like you need to like, you don't mean it to be like this, but they then feel responsible to not make you feel harm, even though you're inevitably going to anyway, because you have past trauma. Not that it's your fault and that you should ever be blamed, but it's a case of, it's another incentive for healing, and that your relationships will improve the more you sort of identify these sort of like traits and stuff in yourself. Hopefully if you have healthy enough people in your life, they'll sort of stand by you through it. But at the same time, like, you know, it's about you as a person. It's not kind of their responsibility to sort of like compensate for your you know, issues that you're dealing with at that time, even though I feel like, you know, you can show a level of compassion, but you know, like I want someone to sort of be sort of like on my shoulder about it the whole time anyway. Time boundaries, time and energy boundaries. I feel like narcissists are this massive time suck and an energy suck. People that are sociopathic, you know, energy suck, because you just constantly have to find the line within yourself to be, where is it appropriate to react, where is it appropriate to assert myself, where is it appropriate to fight back, where is it appropriate to ignore, you know what I mean? Just people that like are like baiting you consistently, like that is a real energy suck at times, which is why just kind of distracting yourself in the time being that you have to deal with that situation, just going about your life and sort of focusing on things that you can control, because also you can't control other people. That's one of the things you can't control. Time and energy suck. So time suck, yeah, just people that expect too much time and energy from you, and yeah, it's kind of a bit of a given. Mental and physical boundaries. So mental boundaries, your thoughts, values, opinions, beliefs are okay to have separate from another person, and this comes again along with the autonomy element. It's normal and human to have different thoughts, opinions and beliefs and values than other people. Anyone who says you don't have the right to do that, or you have to be sort of fitting with their beliefs, their thoughts, their values, their opinions, is unhealthy and toxic and wrong for a start. Like, just from a universal level, they're wrong. You have free will. God gave you free will. As autonomous source beings, we are within our rights to have our own things like that. You know, and it's normal to differ from others. Like, you know, it's an abnormality in them for them to perceive, they'll perceive that because that's how they are, but that's their issue, that they will perceive you not being able to be autonomous as a person. Like, it really sits with them. It doesn't mean that you need to sort of even take that into consideration. Just let them be who they are. But it doesn't mean that you have to change in any way. I understand that these people are difficult. Again, time, energy suck, but it's, if you have healthy relationships, I think most of the time I've tried to cut toxic people. I think there's a level of 4 out of 5 things need to be sort of healthy for any sort of healthy relationship. If you have 1 out of 5 things that are healthy, that's a toxic relationship, I think, is the understanding from what I know. Obviously not your fault if one of the 5, you know, if you're one of the 5 things, and one of the 5 things is that you can actually go out your way to make them feel better, that's not a healthy relationship in my opinion, or in like logical opinion if you ask me. But it's a case of you know, obviously everyone needs to make their own decisions. I'm not trying to push anyone here, but I'm also saying sometimes it's healthy, I feel like, to evaluate. for me. And for healthy relationships, it's agreement to disagree sometimes. I think in friendships, you know, you have different ways of going about stuff. Like I might go about stuff by, you know, some of my past conditioning of being some form of alpha issue. I even had a conversation with my friend recently where I can sometimes just sort of want to sort of not kind of dominate almost and control the situation, but not from a controlling level, from an alpha level where I feel the need to sort of just do that. I can just be a bit overbearing, and I catch myself straight away because I've had multiple people in my childhood have an issue with it. And when I started to go into my gamma level, I have a video on alpha, gamma. Alphas also turn into gammas later in life. I have like loads more gamma traits, and it made me temper myself and be obviously less concerned with other people. But like some people withdraw more if they feel anxious and like they've got a lot on or whatever. Like for example, I have a friend like that, and I obviously apologise because I've had a lot on as well. But I feel like the way I go about it is I kind of, you know, kind of dominate it, and it's not she's not wrong for withdrawing. I'm not wrong for sort of I mean, I am to an extent, and if it was withdrawing to the fact where like, you know, it was damaging the relationship, then that's one thing. But and obviously that's not her fault either, but it's a case of people react in different ways, but we can agree to disagree as a healthy, you know, dynamic. People that are not healthy in dynamic, often there's a toxic person or two toxic people, or a person that's turned toxic by the other person that kind of stops the harmony in the relationship. Lots of people don't want harmony in relationships, so they will just create discord in whatever way that means, even if it's really, really logical stuff like I just want to have a conversation with you about how we do something. They don't want that. They just want any sort of fuss, issue, attention, whatever problem that comes from them to them, energy, because they can't get it from any other positive means that sort of like normal healthy people would. Yeah, so I think that's basically everything. Obviously sexual boundaries come under this as well, but I don't really want to talk too much about that. Obviously things like sexual comments, like again, you can get that looked at in workplaces. No one should have to experience like sexual harassment and stuff. There's laws against that. Obviously, you know, sexual aggression and abuse and stuff. That's obviously really important, especially, and to get I mean, not especially, all of it's really important to get sort of like support if that's needed. And obviously, people can uncover things at all ages of life about sexual abuse and things like that. So. I think, yeah, you're in your rights to make limits and boundaries with people, and recognising your own personal limits is so important in this stuff as well, because it kind of just helps you prioritise yourself in that, you know, I put my health first. Since I've had mental health problems, my health comes first in all situations, because I've just been at the other end of the spectrum, just never going back. Obviously, I think I've just got a healthy balance in life, but it's a case of, you know, once you understand your limits. Oh, I don't want to lose this video. Yeah, once you understand your limits, hopefully it should be okay now. Once you understand your limits, boundaries, and everything, you can kind of just be like, do you know what? I haven't got the energy for that anymore. So you just cut it off. And if someone's not receiving good or bad energy from you, some people want bad energy, some people want good energy. Narcissists want both. Most people just don't want bad energy and they just want to sort of like bumble through life. But yeah, if they're not receiving that energy from you, they'll just move on usually. So there's light on the end of the tunnel, and I definitely am a believer of like set point where I definitely think you have to encounter these things throughout life, but I think you can get to a set point place where you're kind of, I think, just put at a disposition as a child, if you encounter these things without your sort of ability to be able to handle it or understand it. So once you kind of heal from that stuff, or in like younger life, you can really bring yourself to like a set point level of like that you can maintain, like for issues that you might have like been carrying around without knowing it and stuff. And so I'm a massive advocate of therapy and sort of like understanding these things. And then when these things come up, you can just sort of deal with them a bit easier. Not to say like no one will, and you won't encounter any more narcissists or sociopaths, whatever. But once you know your physical limits and when to discard people, and you kind of keep building on that, you'll have like this massively resilient grounding to handling these situations in the future, and how to deal with any sort of toxic stuff that comes up. Obviously, we always have new experiences. But anyway, I don't want to lose this video, so thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you very soon. Bye.